You sit down in the chair, the same one as last time. You hesitate for a moment, like always, adjusting your posture, unsure what part of you is welcome here. There's a silence, not empty, not awkward, but expectant. Your eyes drift toward the therapist across from you, who is not speaking, not pushing, just waiting. And somehow, that waiting feels like an invitation. You're not sure yet what for. You've always carried the weight alone. Not by choice necessarily, but because that's how it's always been. You learned early that your pain made others uncomfortable, that your fears were too loud, that your sadness needed to be zipped up, smiled over, managed. So you did. You became the one others leaned on, the one who didn't cry, the one who always seemed fine. But in the quiet corners of your life, especially at night, the ache returned. The hollow, the knowing that something wasn't right, not broken exactly, but missing. This room is strange for you. It breaks the rules you've internalized. You're not here to perform, not here to explain, not even to be strong. And that confuses you, because for as long as you can remember, strength was a currency of survival. I just feel empty, you say, finally. It escapes your lips before you fully decided to share it. But there it is, hanging between you both. And to your surprise, it's not met with a fix or prescription or advice. It's met with presence. The therapist nods gently, and the room seems to soften. That emptiness, they say slowly, isn't a flaw. It might just be loneliness, the deep kind, the kind we all feel when we're out of connection with others, and sometimes with ourselves. You don't respond right away. The words settle like dust. You've never thought of it that way. Loneliness, not as a failure of social life, but as an existential condition. Not just being alone, but feeling alone in the world. Unseen, unwitnessed. You shift in your seat. Something stirs. Maybe it's the beginning of relief. Maybe it's grief. You realize how long you've lived with this silence, this background ache, and how rarely you've allowed anyone to sit with it beside you. In existential psychotherapy, Irvin Yalom writes that loneliness is not simply the absence of others, but the deep recognition that no one else can live your life, make your choices, or die your death. It's a truth that terrifies. And yet, paradoxically, it's in facing this truth with another that healing begins. You are here in this room because some part of you is tired of pretending you don't need that. I don't think I know how to connect, you confess. Not really. I talk to people. I get along. But I always feel like I'm not really with them. Your therapist leans forward slightly. That feeling is more common than you think. A lot of people go through life surrounded by others, but starving for real contact. Not surface-level interaction, but emotional intimacy. Being seen. Being understood, not fixed, not judged. Just witnessed. You feel something tighten in your chest. Maybe a memory. Maybe a longing. You don't say anything more, but in this silence, something is happening. You're not solving the loneliness. You're not outrunning it. You're simply in it, and for the first time, not alone. You start to understand what Winnicott meant by the holding environment. Not a physical place, but a relational one, where it is safe to be real, to be raw. You begin to grasp that therapy is not just talking about feelings. It's about rebuilding the ability to feel with another person, to let someone in. And that's terrifying, but it's also a relief. Because deep down, you've always suspected that your pain would be unbearable to someone else. That if you really open up, the other would turn away, or leave, or crumble under the weight. But here, that doesn't happen. The therapist is still here, still breathing with you, still looking at you. Not with pity, not with worry, but with presence. You wonder if this is what healing might look like. Not a lightning bolt of transformation, but the slow thawing of a frozen part of you. The part that gave up on being known. The session nears its end. You don't want to go, but you also feel different, slightly, as if something unnamed has shifted. Not because you solved anything, but because someone sat with you in the dark and didn't flinch. And maybe, just maybe, you don't have to heal alone anymore. You come into the session expecting answers. You've read enough, thought enough, questioned enough to believe that maybe there's a method, a step-by-step procedure to finally unravel what's been quietly unraveling you. But the therapist doesn't give you a checklist. They don't diagnose you like a broken machine. They sit there like last time, not distant, not clinical, but present, fully human. At first, this confuses you. Part of you wants something more structured, like an expert in a white coat, ready to fix you. You want them to look at your mind the way a mechanic looks at a car engine, detached, precise, efficient. And yet, something about their gaze disarms you. There's no coldness, no hovering sense of superiority. They are here with you, not above you. You speak slowly today, not because you don't have things to say, but because you're afraid of saying the wrong thing, of wasting time, of being too much. But every time you pause, they don't rush you. They don't jump to conclusions. They don't fill the silence. They wait, not as if they're analyzing, but as if they're listening from someplace deep inside themselves. And then they say something that stays with you. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to walk with you. The words hit differently, because for so long, your experience of help has come wrapped in the language of solutions. Everyone wanted to make you better, more productive, less messy, more together. But no one ever seemed to want to be with you in the not knowing. No one offered to sit with you in the wilderness. Irvin Yalom called this kind of therapist a fellow traveler. Someone who doesn't pretend to be immune to the very struggles you're bringing into the room. They've known fear. They've known grief. And though they may not share the exact shape of your pain, they recognize the terrain. They don't lead from a pedestal. They walk beside you, sometimes even behind you, letting you go first when you need to feel strong. You mentioned something about feeling broken, a sense that your inner world is too complex, too contradictory, too tangled to ever be understood. The therapist doesn't argue. They don't deny your feelings or flood you with counterexamples. Instead, they say softly, it makes sense that you feel that way. And that validation, quiet, simple, is more powerful than any polished insight. You realize something else. The way they speak to you doesn't carry the weight of professional detachment. It's not robotic. It's warm, respectful, responsive. You feel like they're with you, not just watching you. There's a real person behind the role. This breaks a rule you didn't know you were following. That in therapy, you're supposed to be the patient and they're supposed to be the expert. But what if healing requires less hierarchy and more humanity? Carl Jung once wrote that a good therapist is not someone who has reached perfection, but someone who has faced their own darkness and continues to do so. You begin to see that in this room, the therapist's authority doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from their willingness to be present in the unknown with you. They tell you, there's no map here, but we can navigate the fog together. And that metaphor sticks, because that's what your life has felt like for a long time. Fog. You were hoping therapy would clear it, but instead, you're learning to move through it step by step with someone at your side. Something else starts to shift. You feel less ashamed, less like a problem, more like a person who's allowed to be complicated, to not know, to search. You begin to let go of the idea that healing means becoming normal, and start embracing the idea that healing means becoming real. By the end of the session, you find yourself smiling, not because everything's resolved, but because for once, you're not walking alone. You're not being analyzed from a distance or treated like a disorder. You're being accompanied. You remember something Yalom wrote. It's the relationship that heals, not the training, not the interventions, not the theories. The relationship. And today, that relationship felt like a lighthouse in your storm. There's something different about today, though you can't quite name it. The room looks the same. Soft light, neutral walls, the quiet hum of life outside, just beyond the glass. But the air feels heavier, fuller. Maybe it's what you brought in with you. Or maybe it's what's starting to awaken between you and the person sitting across from you. You talk hesitantly at first. Then, as your words begin to move, something shifts. You find yourself saying things you didn't plan to say. Not rehearsed stories. Not the curated version of your life. Just truth. Uneven, raw, unrevised truth. And strangely, it doesn't feel unsafe. You're not afraid they'll interrupt, correct you, or try to fix it. They just stay with you, attuned, Still, listening like what you're saying matters. For the first time in a long while, maybe ever, you feel like someone is actually seeing you, not your mask, not your performance. You, and that moment, so subtle, so quiet, feels like a crack of light in a long, sealed corridor. You don't realize it right away, but you've entered something sacred, not in the religious sense, but in the deeply human one. A space where judgment dissolves, where roles fall away, and where something real begins to breathe between two people. This isn't just a session. It's a meeting, the kind Martin Buber called nigh, thou encounter. Buber believed that most of life is lived in in relationships, functional, distant, transactional. You play roles, exchange pleasantries, keep safe. But in an thou moment, the barriers drop. You meet another not as a thing or a role, but as a soul, whole, present, equal. That's what this feels like. You pause mid-sentence, tears welling for reasons you can't fully explain. You look up, almost apologizing, but the therapist doesn't recoil. They don't awkwardly look away. They meet your eyes, gently, calmly. It's the kind of look that says, "It's okay, I'm still here." In that gaze, something ancient and human stirs inside you, the longing to be received just as you are. No defenses, no conditions, just presence. Irvin Yalom once wrote that therapy is not about fixing the client, but about meeting them, truly meeting them. In this space, you begin to believe that. You begin to experience it. There's no formula guiding this exchange, no script, and yet it feels more meaningful than anything rehearsed. You realize that what's happening isn't about the content of what you're saying. It's not about the trauma you're unpacking or the fears you're naming, though those matter. It's about the context. It's about the invisible net of connection being slowly woven between two human beings. And that net, that relational field, is what's holding your pain now, not just your words. There's a term in therapy, the intersubjective space. It sounds academic, abstract, but here, in this room, you understand it in your bones. It's the place where your inner world and there's overlap, where your stories and silences are no longer yours alone. They're shared, witnessed, held. And that's the miracle, isn't it? That's something internal. Something you thought was yours to carry in secret now breathes between two hearts. And it doesn't destroy the bond. It strengthens it. You begin to wonder how much of your suffering has come not just from the pain itself, but from the isolation that wrapped around it, from a belief that no one could ever understand, that you were too much, or not enough, or simply unworthy of being seen. But here, in this sacred space, that belief starts to loosen. The therapist leans in slightly, not to offer advice, but to be with you more fully. And that gesture, so small, lands like a revelation. You don't need fixing. You need presence. You need to not be alone in the dark. You take a deep breath, the kind that fills more than your lungs. It fills your chest, your throat, your skin. It feels like something is returning. Maybe trust, maybe self-compassion, maybe a kind of hope that doesn't shout, but whispers. Maybe I'm not beyond reach. The session draws to a close. You feel the time ending, but the space remains. It's not just a room anymore. It's a place you now carry inside, a place where your voice can rise without fear, where your silence is not a burden, and where another person's presence can hold your most fragile truths. As you step outside, something is different. The world hasn't changed, but your place in it has. Because now you know this much. Healing doesn't always begin with answers. Sometimes it begins with being seen. You sit down, and for a moment, neither of you speaks. Today, something feels heavier, not because of what happened this week, but because of what you started to realize, that all of this, everything, everyone, including yourself, is temporary. You've always known it intellectually, of course, but now you feel it, and that's different. It lives in your chest now, not just your mind, like a quiet panic that hasn't fully found its shape. I've been thinking about death a lot lately. You say, almost testing the air, waiting for discomfort, waiting to be redirected. But the therapist doesn't flinch. Good. They say, not smiling, not joking, just honest. Most people spend their lives avoiding that thought. But when you face it, something opens. You weren't expecting that. You were expecting reassurance, maybe even distraction. But instead, you're being invited to go deeper. You hesitate. It's not that I want to die. I don't. But sometimes I wonder, what's the point of everything if it all just ends? Why try? Why hope? Why care so much if it's all going to be gone? There's a long silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that respects the question. Then they ask, when you feel this most, you look down at your hands. At night, when everything's quiet, when no one needs anything from me, that's when it comes in. This awareness of the end. You're surprised at how easily the words come now. Death has always been the last thing you let yourself think about. The forbidden territory. But in this room, you're walking right into it. And strangely, it doesn't feel as terrifying. Not yet. The therapist nods. Irvin Yalom wrote that the fear of death is at the root of many anxieties, and that we tend to cover it up with distractions, goals, relationships, habits. But when we stop running, when we actually sit with that fear, it can teach us something profound. You ask, like what? That you're alive, that this moment matters, that everything you love is fragile, and therefore infinitely valuable. You let that settle. It's not comforting, not in the way you're used to, but it's true. And sometimes truth is a different kind of comfort, the kind that doesn't protect you from reality, but helps you stand more honestly within it. You recall a memory, maybe from childhood, maybe more recent, a hospital room, the sound of a beeping monitor, the way time slows when someone you love is close to the end. You remember the way everything suddenly became clear, the regrets, the tenderness, the absurdity of the petty things. In the shadow of death, the truth glows brighter. Why does it take loss to make us care more? You ask. The therapist smiles softly. Because we forget. We live as if we have endless time. We say we'll call them tomorrow, forgive later, change next year. Death reminds us that the window is always closing, and that awareness can either paralyze us or wake us up. You nod slowly. You've spent years chasing things you can't even name, trying to build something permanent in a world that's not designed to last. You've tried to hide your fear of death by staying busy, by staying numb. But now that you've stopped, even just for this hour, you're beginning to feel something else rise beneath the fear. Clarity. You look up, so what do I do with this fear? How do I live with it? The therapist doesn't answer right away. Then, you don't need to get rid of it. You learn to let it walk beside you. And in its presence, you begin to choose more consciously. You love more deliberately. You speak more honestly. You stop waiting. You exhale a long, unguarded breath. You weren't expecting this topic today. But now, nothing else feels more important. This awareness isn't making you sink. It's making you see. You remember something else Yalom wrote. Though the physicality of death destroys us, the idea of death saves us. And now, you finally understand it. Death, when faced with courage and compassion, can become a mirror, one that reflects back what truly matters. The session ends soon, but you don't rush to leave. You sit for a few more seconds, letting the stillness hold you. It feels different now. You're still afraid, but you're also more awake. You rise slowly, and for the first time in a long time, you don't feel like you're running from anything. You're simply walking forward, with eyes open, and death walking beside you, no longer as an enemy, but as a quiet teacher. There are things you still haven't said, not because you don't want to, but because you don't have the language. How do you describe an ache that was always there? A silence that settled in before you had words? Some wounds aren't stories. They're atmospheres, things you grew up breathing in, believing they were just air. Today, you don't talk much. You come in, sit down, and the weight follows you like it always does. But you don't pretend it's not there this time. You don't hide behind polite smiles or distracting chatter. You just sit, and the therapist sits with you. They don't ask you to explain it. They don't rush to analyze. They let the silence stretch, not in discomfort, but in trust. You're learning that this silence is not empty. It's holding space for something that still hasn't found form. for a pain that was once dismissed, overlooked, or perhaps never acknowledged at all. You want to say something, maybe about how tired you are, or how certain memories come back without images, only sensations, like a sudden pressure in your chest, or that old feeling of being invisible in a crowded room. But you can't speak it. Not yet. And somehow that's okay. You glance up and find the therapist still with you, not in their notes, not checking the time. Just there, present, grounded. You realize how rare that is, how often people drift when you talk, how you've learned to center yourself to avoid becoming too much. But here, no one turns away. Winnicott once wrote that healing begins when a person is allowed to exist in the presence of another without being invaded or abandoned. That's what this moment feels like. You're not being fixed. You're not being ignored. You're simply allowed to be in all your ambiguity, your unfinishedness, your silence. Something inside begins to stir. Not a breakthrough, not a dramatic release, but a gentle thawing. The kind you barely notice until later, when the room is emptied, and you realize you're breathing just a bit more freely than before. There are memories you still can't touch, not directly. Moments you're not sure even happened the way you remember, but that still live in your body like ghosts. The times you reached out and found no one there. The things you needed to hear, but never did. The shame you absorbed, not because anyone said out loud, but because no one said otherwise. These are what Yalom might call existential wounds. Not the sharp traumas of catastrophe, but the slow erosion of meaning, belonging, and visibility. They're hard to articulate, harder to validate. But here, in this quiet room, they're starting to be seen. You find yourself saying just one thing, a sentence, maybe two. You don't know where they came from, but they land like truth. You're not even sure you meant to speak them aloud. And the therapist listens, not with shock, not with pity, just with presence. That presence is doing something you didn't expect. It's not giving you answers. It's not removing the pain, but it's helping you believe, maybe for the first time, that the pain can be shared, that it's not too dark, not too messy, not too late. You used to believe that if you ever open up this part of yourself, people would walk away, that your silence had protected them. But now, someone is staying, sitting with the unspoken, and it's not destroying them. It's deepening the connection. Yalom wrote, the therapist must strive to create a new, emotionally corrective relationship, one that allows the client to experience what they never could. And maybe that's what's happening here. You're not just talking about your wounds. You're slowly living something different, a new kind of safety, a new kind of intimacy. Even when the words don't come, the presence does. And that presence says, you don't have to explain yourself to be worthy of care. You don't have to have the perfect narrative to be heard. You don't have to be whole to be held. You leave the session without much having been said, but you feel lighter, as if something old and quiet inside you was acknowledged, not in language, but in presence, in silence that listened, in stillness that stayed. This is what healing sometimes looks like. Not fireworks, but slow repair. Not loud declarations, but someone sitting beside you while you search for your voice. Not a cure, but a quiet promise. You're no longer alone with what you carry. You never really noticed the moment it started to shift. There was no dramatic epiphany, no cinematic swell of music in the background. You just started walking out of the room a little different each time. Not fixed, but changed. Subtly, there was a time when you came here only to unload, to pour out the things no one else wanted to hear. You believed that was a point, to vent, to analyze, to finally understand. But lately, you've realized that what's actually healing isn't just what's said, it's what's felt. It's what happens between the lines, between you and the therapist, between the silences, the sighs, the subtle nods, the small, almost imperceptible shifts in how you relate to each other. You've stopped asking yourself, am I getting better? Instead, you started noticing, am I being different? And more importantly, am I being more me? Irvin Yalom, in his deeply human approach, once said, it's a relationship that heals, the relationship, the relationship, the relationship. And now you understand why he repeated it. It isn't a side effect. It's the mechanism. You don't always talk about the same wounds anymore. Some of them have loosened their grip on you. Some have softened, as if no longer needing to scream for attention. And some are still there, but you're no longer afraid of them. That's not because they magically disappeared. It's because, week after week, someone showed up and stayed with you through them. It's not just that your therapist understands you. It's that they've helped you understand what it feels like to be understood, and that changes how you move through the world. You start to recognize, out there, what feels real and what doesn't. You stop trying to perform for people who only love the version of you that entertains or achieves or complies. You become less tolerant of shallow connections, more protective of your inner world, not in a defensive way, but with a new sense of value. You now know how much presence matters. You've felt what happens when someone doesn't interrupt your silence. You've seen what changes when someone isn't trying to fix you, but is fully invested in seeing you. And slowly, you start offering that same presence to others, to your partner, your child, your friend, even to yourself. That's the moment it clicks. This wasn't just about therapy. It was about how you relate to people, to pain, to life. The therapist, sitting across from you, became a mirror, not one that shows your flaws, but one that reflects your wholeness, even the broken parts, especially the broken parts. They didn't do it with tricks. They didn't hold back or hide behind a clinical mask. They brought their humanity into the room, and that gave you permission to do the same. Sometimes you notice emotion in their eyes when you shared something raw. Sometimes they laugh with you, not out of politeness, but because something was genuinely funny. Sometimes they paused, and you could tell they were really thinking, not trying to recite a textbook, but reaching for something real. It's that authenticity that stayed with you. And it's why this relationship, though bounded by time and space and ethics, feels unlike anything you've known before. And it changes you. You begin to internalize that voice. Not their literal voice, but the one they modeled. The voice that listens with compassion, that challenges with care, that stays curious instead of judgmental. Over time, it becomes your own inner voice. You stop abandoning yourself. You walk out of that room and into the world carrying a new template for connection. One that isn't about needing to be impressive or perfect or put together. One that is grounded in presence, in authenticity, in shared humanity. Winnicott wrote about the concept of the good enough parent. Someone who doesn't have to be perfect, just reliably there. In a way, your therapist became a good enough other. And in turn, you became a good enough self. Not in the sense of settling, but in the sense of being real. The room where you once came to feel broken is now where you remembered your wholeness. And so, as you rise from the chair, maybe not today, maybe weeks from now, you realize something quiet but powerful. The work is no longer just in the room. It's out there, in your relationships, in your choices, in how you breathe through discomfort instead of running from it, in how you speak with honesty and how you listen with care. Therapy didn't give you a new personality. It reawakened your original one, the one buried under years of defenses and adaptations, the one that is still evolving, still becoming. And as you close the door behind you, stepping out into whatever comes next, you carry this invisible thing. Not a diagnosis, not a cure, but relationship, a felt relationship, the kind that teaches you. You were never unworthy of love. You were just waiting for someone to see the parts no one else had the courage to look at. Now, you can be that someone for yourself, and maybe one day for someone else. That if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment that could change your perspective. We share stories that speak to the soul, and you being here means you're part of something deeper. Leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced a moment of true connection like this? Let's keep the conversation alive. Your voice matters.